My name is Jamin Goecker. I'm a realtor in South Central Alaska, and my mission is to help you to build an intentional and significant legacy for yourself and your family by coaching you in real estate. And today, what we're going to be talking about is how you can find a commercial fishing job up here in Alaska. So there are a lot of ins and outs. And a lot of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you is going to be information I got from a pretty extensive conversation with Captain Google, and that's his actual name, Captain Google, in a podcast episode I did with him. I think it was about a year and a half ago. So the link for that episode is going to be in the description section down below, but I do share in this video kind of some of the big highlights. So do make sure you go check that out. And if you haven't done so already, do get this video like and subscribe so you can receive more information like this. And let's go and jump into today's video talking about how you're going to find a seasonal commercial fishing job up here in Alaska. So first off, what I'm going to say is we are not talking about fish processing. We are talking about actually getting on a commercial fishing boat. And the second thing I would say is that you need to really think hard about whether or not this is something that you want to be jumping into, because there is no easy way out once you're out there in the middle of the ocean and you realize, hey, this really isn't for me. So it's a really tough environment. It's way more psychological than you would think, because you are literally in it 24/7, and you're going to be on this 16 by 32 odd square boat for an extended period of time, weeks, sometimes months at a time. And you need to make sure that you are up for that. If you're not used to working long days, long physical kind of days, then this might not be what you need to be looking for. Obviously, you can make a lot of money over the course of a summer, depending on which ship that you're with. Keep in mind, the way the pay works on these fishing boats is you are usually going to be getting a percentage of whatever the catch is. Okay, so this isn't your hourly W-2 job. Okay, this is more like what I do in real estate, where you're going to be getting a cut of whatever the production of your output is. So if you go out there, you get a complete dud of a crew, and maybe just a lot of bad luck, and you guys don't catch anything. Well, guess what? If you're lucky, you got to go out to sea for a little bit. For a little bit, I mean the entire summer. Spent the entire time on the boat and didn't make anything. Or you can go out there and make anywhere like $20,000, $30,000, $30,000+ over the course of the summer. Which, if you're young, that's great. But yes, just really make sure you know what you're getting into, and you're not just jumping into it because of some TV show that you saw out there, or you saw some clickbait post about somebody making $40,000, $50,000 over the course of a couple of years, and they were just hanging out with their buddies the entire time. It is way more challenging than that. It can be a lot of fun, I've been told, if you've got the right crew, but don't expect it to just be sunshine and rainbows the entire way. So when you're trying to stand out to boat captains and you're trying to approach them, you need to be able to display a number of traits really well if you're going to get onto a good boat. Because keep in mind, if you don't get onto that good boat, you're not making anything. Okay, so you've got to make sure you get onto the good boat with a good skipper, with a good solid crew, or this whole thing doesn't work. So number one, you need to be able to show you are competitive, because that is the nature of the commercial fishing industry. That was one of the big takeaways I got from talking with Captain Google, just that it is very competitive. Your gain is going to be somebody's loss. It's not like everybody's out there and there's just an infinite number of fish. There are a certain number of fish that are coming in, and anything you catch is something that somebody else didn't. And obviously everything is competitive within the rules, but you've got to keep in mind it's competitive. It's a zero-sum game out there, and you need to be able to lock and load when you have to. The next thing that I would say is you need to be able to show that you have got an insane work ethic. Okay, you've got to be able to show that, hey, I can work 20 hours a day, or longer if necessary, and just keep trucking, and it's not gonna I'm not going to break down, and you're not going to have to figure out what to do with me when we're out in the middle of the ocean. Okay, they have zero wiggle room for that, and that's why it's so difficult to break into this industry if you're starting from the outside and nobody can vouch for you. So you need to be able to show you have an insane work ethic, and number three, you also need to be able to show you are really good-natured, under stress, okay? Because you are on that small boat out there and everyone's going to be getting on everybody's nerves after being up for, 18, 20 hours. And you need to be able to show, hey, even when, the stress is there and it's crunch time, then I can still be someone that's pleasant to be around and not just be so irritable that I just drive everybody insane, okay? So that's huge, and you need to be able to show that. Fourth big trait that you need to show is that you are humble, okay? That was one of the big takeaways I got from talking with Captain Kugel, is that if you are coming in and you are way too cocky and you're saying, hey, I know exactly what I'm doing because I've done this or this and this before, and this is really similar, they're probably not even going to look at you, okay? You need to have a really, really humble approach, because unless you have gone fishing in those specific fisheries before, then you need to just shut up and listen. That's the most direct way I can say it. If you're out there, you don't know what you're doing, and you're not listening because you're not humble, you're going to be a danger to yourself and everybody else around you. So you've got to be humble, and that is one of the big traits that they look for if they're captains. They have to know that they can tell you something, and your ego's not going to be getting in the way or bruised every time they're just trying to tell you something. Now, the sixth trait that I would say is you've got to show that you're teachable, and this kind of goes back to humility a little bit, but you've got to be in a mode where you are constantly just absorbing everything like a sponge, and preferably kind of be quick on the uptake. There are people who have been, fishing for like 60 plus years, and they're still like, hey, just thinking back to my past year, I think I could have done this a little bit differently. And it's just really that mindset that you have to really, really latch onto as you're moving forward. Another thing you really need to know as you're trying to decide if this is something you want to jump into is just understanding how the salmon runs in each one of the areas that you're looking at are going to be done. There are some that are just cutthroat, brutal as all get out, and there are others where it's not going to quite be that natured, but most of them will be to a certain extent. But you have to understand how the timeline works for each one of the salmon runs, know the difference, and know what you're getting into. Let's take a break here real quick. For those of you who are looking at finding some kind of a seasonal fishing job, do make sure you check out that link to the entire podcast interview I had with Captain Google in the description section down below. That's going to be a really good insight, and he shares lots of stories from his experience of working out there on a boat, because he's done it his entire life. So that's going to be your best source of information. But let's go and finish today's video. Now, these are things that are going to be really important for you as you're deciding if this is going to be something you want to do. Well, let's say you've decided you want to do this. Now, these are the really important things that you need to get right in order to have a successful season. I've already said this before, but find the right captain. If you are finding somebody just from a job ad, that's usually a bad sign. Okay, if you are a good captain, people want to get onto your crew who work around you in your industry, and they are usually not going to have to look very far at all to find someone who's willing to jump onto their crew. If they are having to advertise, sometimes that's really a sign that they kind of have a turn and burn approach to hiring people on. So that's number one. Make sure that you don't just treat every captain, one is the same as the other. No, absolutely not. Some captains have great reputations, others have terrible reputations. Some are very competent, some are very incompetent, just like in any industry. And you need to be able to decide which is which, because at the end of the day, you are not going to be making any kind of an hourly wage. You're getting a cut of the overall share. The next thing that I would say for getting hired, your options are pretty much, follow those ads like I mentioned before. I take that with a big grain of salt. Number two, walk the docks in the ports where a lot of these fishermen are going to be getting ready for the year, and talk with people, network. And the third one, and most effective, is to actually know somebody who's already in the industry up here. So there's a lot of degrees of separation. So if you know someone who knows somebody, use every connection you can who can vouch for you and say, hey, great work ethic, great attitude, and has no problem with being humble, and he's very teachable, or she's very teachable too. So that's really going to be your best option. Make sure that if possible, you use the network that's already there. Last and not least, once you do actually get that conversation with a skipper and you're trying to decide, hey, is this the right thing or not, ask a lot of questions. Okay, ask as many questions as you possibly can. So chances are that's actually going to be a really good sign to the skipper, because it shows that you're conscientious, you're thinking ahead, and you can kind of take ownership of yourself a little bit. So they probably feel like they have less time babysitting you. So ask questions like, hey, what are the actual cuts? What are the expenses I need to have? What's the specific gear that you want me to get? Because that's going to make a really big difference. What are, the routes, the equipment, try to get as much information as you possibly can. That's going to show that you are on top of what you're doing. You're going to be taking responsibility for yourself because you're asking all these questions ahead of time. And that's going to make a much better impression than somebody coming in who is super arrogant and way, way too sure of themselves, for someone who may or may not have ever actually done anything like this. And no, just going out for a little fishing charter for the day doesn't mean anything. That is one day it doesn't compare. So I sure hope this is useful. This is a great job if you can get it, depending on the time of life that you're in. If you have, lots of kids, or you have a family, it may or may not be a great time for you. That's something only you can decide, but it's put a lot of kids through college without any debt, and it's been a great source of income for a lot of other folks. So I sure hope this has been useful. Do make sure you get this video a like if you haven't done so already, and we'll see you next time.